Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Flying Officer Callan Stacey. This evening, we remember and commemorate the 79th anniversary of victory in the Pacific Day. On the afternoon of the 15th of August 1945, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his nation's acceptance of the Allies' terms of surrender. It was more than 3.5 years since Japanese troops had invaded Malaya and bombed Pearl Harbor. News of Japan's surrender produced spontaneous celebrations in Australia, the United States, and in war-ravaged Asia and Europe. The Second World War was over. Japan's formal surrender took place on the 2nd of September when their delegation signed the documents of surrender aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, marking the official end of the Second World War. Today, we pay our respects to the almost 40,000 Australian men and women who died as a result of their service during the Second World War and who are commemorated here on the Roll of Honour. We also remember the survivors who returned home. Shortly, we will hear the story of Lieutenant Ian William Walker, who was amongst those killed in action on the 5th of December 1942. This evening, we warmly welcome Mr. Patrick Delgaitis, Deputy President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch, and Wing Commander Michael Garside, Vice President of the ACT Division of the Air Force Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Robertson Public School, Robertson, New South Wales. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, attention! Catapult party, present arms!
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult party, shoulder arms! Catapult party, order arms!
Please be seated if able. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Ian William Walker. Ian Walker was born on the 3rd of September 1919 in Essendon, Victoria. He was one of 10 children born to William Walker, an engineer, and wife Eunice. After his schooling, he studied bookkeeping. At the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, he was living at Moorna Station on the border of New South Wales and Victoria, where he worked as a jackaroo. Ian Walker enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 22nd of October 1939 and began training. In November, his older brother Keith was assigned to the same battalion. The two brothers embarked for active service together in April 1940, sailing from Melbourne on the troop ship Y4. Private Walker arrived in Egypt with his brother in May 1940 and continued training in Palestine and Egypt, where Ian Walker was promoted to corporal. In late December, they took part in the first major Australian action of the war at Bardia in January 1941. Walker's unit also fought at Tobruk before being assigned to defensive duties at Masa Brega on the western frontier of the advance. In April, Walker's unit was sent to defend Greece from the Nazi invasion, which began on the 6th. German forces swiftly advanced, forcing the 2nd 7th into a long withdrawal until their evacuation from Kalamata 20 days later. Their ship was attacked by German aircraft, leaving the men of the 2nd 7th to be rescued by British ships, which took them to Crete to defend the coastline. Following the German airborne invasion on the 20th of May, they were moved westward to the fighting around Canea. Walker's unit played a critical rearguard role as the Allies were forced to retreat across Crete. The 2nd 7th held the last Allied position on Crete for 3 nights, then withdrew to the beach on the 1st of June, but they had to watch the last ships depart without them. Walker spotted a small landing craft that had been abandoned. After repairing it, Walker and his brother set off with several others. They had to abandon the rest of their unit where the beach was attacked by enemy aircraft. The men spent over a week at sea with dwindling supplies of petrol and rations until they reached the coast of Sidi Barini in Egypt. An English regiment provided food and drink before sending trucks to take the men to Alexandria to rejoin their units. Ian Walker was commissioned to the rank of lieutenant and spent another month at the officers' training school. He saw out the rest of the year in the Middle East before returning to Australia via Ceylon in March of 1942 as part of a force defending against possible Japanese attack. The 2nd 7th arrived back in Melbourne in August in preparation for the deployment to the Pacific. Walker's unit arrived in Papua at the end of October 1942 and were stationed around Milne Bay. They spent November engaged in construction, mapping and routine patrols further to the north, near the town of Buna. American units were engaged in heavy fighting with Japanese forces who had been entrenched there since July 1941. By December, the American troops were suffering heavy losses, despite managing to gain some ground as the enemy retreated along the Kokoda Trail. To help the Americans to make a breakthrough, Walker and several other men from the 2nd 7th were sent to North Buna with Bren gun carriers. Though fast, the carriers offered little protection and had only light armour. On the 5th of December 1942, the senior American officer, Lieutenant General Robert Eschelberger, against advice from Australian officers, sent Walker and his comrades into battle on 5 Bren gun carriers. The Australians began a frontal attack on the enemy's bunkers and were left largely unprotected by the uncertain American troops. A number of Australians were quickly cut down by machine gun fire and grenades from the bunkers. Walker made his way back into the crossfire, retrieving the guns and ammunition from 3 of the carriers. Ordering the man who had accompanied him to return to the safety of Allied lines, he armed himself with a submachine gun and rushed for the fourth carrier, but was mortally wounded by enemy fire. In January 1943, Walker was posthumously awarded the American Distinguished Service Cross for his action, which was described by Americans as extraordinary heroism. Today he lies at Bumana War Cemetery near Port Moresby beneath the simple inscription chosen by his family. It reads, "Thy will be done." Lieutenant Ian William Walker was 23 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Ian William Walker, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, in the hope of a better world.
Please.
Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult party, present, arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party, in woods, time. Catapult party, wick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.